Greetings, Obilious monks, uncles, and welcome to Codex Compliant.
Yes, your second favourite old ham-tube series, it's okay, we like arbitrary and more as well, is back for its first video of 2022.
What with all the new Eldar models and such being announced and or released recently, I don't know where they are currently, this part of the script was written a while ago and we don't have the power to change it now. We thought it was time once again to look at some spindly space elves. And since it's going to take a while before we finish painting all the Guardians we have for a model retrospective video,
I'm working on it.
Instead, let's take a look at their 3rd edition codex, written by Gav Thorpe. You know what to do.
Released in 1999 and with lovely cover art by Jeff Taylor, this fits in with the other earlier 3rd edition codexes, where the detail inside was a little sparse compared to what came before and after. But it is a pleasing blue colour, so we'll let it off. Also, since this copy was bought second-hand, hello to Stephen Murphy who owned this particular copy at some point in the past. It's unlikely you're watching, but not impossible. So yes, Codex Eldar, not to be confused with Codex Craftworld Eldar, allowed you to play Craftworld Eldar forces in 3rd edition, not to be confused with Craftworld Eldar forces made using Codex Craftworld Eldar. It's not confusing, shut up. Although this focus on the Craftworld version of the Eldar meant that it was missing some of the more unusual things you could do with the 2nd edition codex, so no Harlequins, pirates or Exodites sadly. What you do get is Avatars of Khaine, Farseers and their Warlock bodyguards for HQ choices, Warp Spiders, Striking Scorpions, Howling Banshees, Fire Dragons and Wraithguard for elites, Rangers, Guardian Storm squads, Dire Avengers and Guardian Defender squads for troops, Wave Serpents for transports, Guardian jet bikes, Shining Spears, Vipers and Swooping Hawks for fast attack, and finally, Falcons, Fire Prisms, Wraith Lords, War Walkers, Support Weapons Batteries and Dark Reapers for heavy support. So nothing particularly surprising.
As regards to how all those units were used, well, for every one Farseer you took, you could have 5 Warlocks, so no Farseer, no Warlocks. Although as well as acting as a bodyguard for the Farseer, they could also join Wraithguard and Guardian squads. So you could spread your ability to throw psychic powers throughout your force a little. Psychic powers that you actually got to pick. Something mundane in modern editions, but in early 3rd it wasn't uncommon for Psykers to just have one default power that you didn't pick, they just had it. Farseers could cast Eldritch Storm, a weak but large blast attack using the big template, Fortune, which allowed you to reroll saves of a selected unit, Guide, which gave a selected unit rerolls on their hits in the shooting phase, and Mind War, where you choose a specific model within 18 inches and try to kill them with your brain. Warlocks got their own 4 to pick from with equally familiar names. They're called Conceal, Destructor, Embolden, and Enhance. I don't really feel the need for us to tell you what they do, because whatever you guess they do based on the names, yeah, you're probably right.
Also, if you want a fun quote to make out of context, here's one from the Avatar's rules. To all intents and purposes, an avatar is a demon. It's just saying that it counts as a demon in gameplay terms, so it's not an actual piece of lore any more than it is that the 3rd edition Fenrisian wolves are actual literal cavalry. But still, it's a quote to drop into a lore thread and run away since, opinions are more divided on this than I expected.
Another neat rule thing is the Exarch powers. Exarch powers, or warrior powers, they use both terms because Games Workshop, can be given to the Exarch in any aspect warrior unit for some points. Which ones they can pick vary depending on what kind of a squad it is, with them all having unique options that assist the squad in doing what it's meant for. For example, a Warp Spider Exarch can take Surprise Assault and Withdraw, which give his squad an extra attack on the charge and the ability to easily disengage from close combat respectively. Or the ones for Shining Spears that amount to Fly a jet bike good and not into a tree. Okay, let's try and quickfire some rule stuff. The only army-wide special rule is that some units can run d6 inches instead of shooting, as that wasn't something anyone could do back then. When unaccompanied by a Warlock or Farseer, each Wraithguard squad would roll a d6 at the start of their turn, and on a 1 they'd just kinda zone out and couldn't do anything that turn. As someone who's currently going through the process of getting diagnosed with ADHD, relatable.
Wave Serpents had their armour values vastly reduced from their original 3rd edition rules in the main rulebook, but got a fancy energy shield to make up for it. Warwalkers got a slightly less good version of it too. Howling Banshee's masks meant that they could always go first in close combat, regardless of initiative, and a Striking Scorpion's Exarch could take a Biting Blade that, if it managed to wound a multi-wound character, could just keep rolling for more wounds until it failed. Vehicles could also be fitted with scythes that stab anyone who tried to assault it and rolled a 1 to hit. Oh, and there's also the Web of Skulls, which we mention mostly because it's a bunch of crystal skulls chained together and thrown at people, which is... well, that's one way to kill someone. You also might have noticed that there's really no distinction between craft worlds in a gameplay sense here. They all just play the same. It would take the release of the aforementioned Craft World Eldar supplement in the year 2000 to give them some individual flavour, but that's a book we'll cover another time.
Of course, this book had named special characters too. The 6 Phoenix Lords are here, all sharing one stat line that's augmented with their specific war gear and warrior powers. Also, according to their lore, Jane Zar, Baharoth and Fugan are all canonically trans, which is super cool considering it was 1999. What, it's short for translation? Nah, that ain't right. There's also a trio of other special characters. Eldrad Ulthran could lead any Ulthway army over 2,000 points, and his precognition allowed him to reposition D3 units after both players had deployed, and add a +1 to 1 reserve roll per turn. Then there was Ian Arinel, an Eandan Spiritseer before Spiritseers were a proper unit, and who did get a model but appears to have never actually been released. Although that doesn't stop examples from popping up on eBay from time to time. And lastly, there was Noaru Fireheart, a wild rider of Samhain. Is that how you pronounce?
No one's quite sure.
A character riding on the back of a viper who eschews one of its ranged weapons for a power weapon to stab people with. I respect that. He sadly never got a model at all. However, although he and Iana later disappeared as playable characters, they have shown up in fiction here and there.
And speaking of fiction, what nuggets of juicy lore can be found in here? Take a note.
What do you want it to say?
Don't ever use the term juicy nuggets in a script again. Like all codices, there's a handful of short stories and fluff deposits to help give you an idea of the general feeling of the ancient Eldar race. Also add the term fluff deposits. The first full page one you get is about an Eldar force wiping out some humans that were poking around some Herudian catacombs. Wiping out some humans that were poking around some Herudian catacombs. Between this fairly apt description of why Death Spinner is an apt name for a warp spider's weapon, and the introduction being,
"The Monkai do not understand their peril. We sent them warnings, messengers to tell them that they must not delve into any past mysteries and terrors, and they ignored us. Well, they will not be able to ignore our weapons. They cannot dare turn a blind eye to our magnificent warriors."
You get the idea that maybe, just maybe, the Eldar don't really value humans that highly. Something backed up by a statement made by a captured Eldar prisoner later on in the book that ends with,
"We will exterminate you. Every world, every vessel, every one of you. Eldrad has seen the stars stained red with your blood, and it pleases him. You think us weak, but we will be your doom, children of Earth."
Not really feeling much love there, you know? There's also an in-universe attempt by humans to understand an Eldar artifact. We mention this purely because the image we are seeing was canonically drawn by Obelius Mung's uncle, Langstry, which is just too fun a detail not to mention. Plus, there's also a section on Eldar weaponry that informs us that shuriken weapons can fire up to 100 rounds a second, which is more than I would have imagined.
Actually, the most interesting bit in here, to us anyway, was a report on the Eldar language by the last diplomatic envoy to the LA-Tok craft world, Lexicon Aldous Murray. The general gist is the Eldar language is incredibly complicated, and even after centuries of study, we barely understand it. You learn that what we call a Falcon Grav Tank is called a Fuehu in the Eldar tongue, which is not just the name of a bird, but the name of a legendary character from Eldar myth. Just to confuse matters further, in the real world, Feohu is an Irish word for wolf, which is why I'm pronouncing it like that, or at least attempting to.
Fuilhu.
It also gives an origin to the term Mon-Kai that the Eldar frequently used to refer to humans as. It was originally the name of a race of sub-intelligent beasts that lived in the twilight realm of Koldo. They were said to be cannibalistic, misshapen creatures that were wiped out by the hero Elronir. Aldous surmises that the word therefore refers to any race the Eldar deem inferior and in need of extermination. See, they're not just calling us monkeys, it's much worse.
Possibly since Eldar aren't always the simplest faction to play, the colour section opens with a little guide on what units are good for what, breaking down into resilient units, those units that either by armour or numbers can take a lot of fire, fast units, units that are not slow, and firepower units, units that are all about the shooting, which includes both anti-tank and anti-infantry types. If you're a long-term player, such things are obvious just by looking at their sultry numbers, but being able to look at a unit's stat line and intuitively know roughly how it should be used is a learned skill, and if this was your first codex, then such a guide could be helpful. Although possibly including Toughness 3 5+ armor save Guardians in the Resilient category might have given the occasional new player some ideas about how much fire an individual Guardian can take that they would not have been able to live up to. And yeah, they're just in that category because you can have them in squads of up to 20, which takes a non-trivial amount of fire to kill. But I was playing Dark Eldar in 3rd edition, so I can tell you from experience that that stat line does not stand up well to assault cannon fire.
Once you get into the painting guides for the different craft worlds, we got a few little touches beyond the sculpts that let us know that the spectre of 2nd edition still haunted the Eldar. From the Ulthway still being shown with yellow helmets, something that they'd lose before the end of the next year, to the fact that an inordinate amount of models are sporting rad flame paint schemes. Although the models we're shown are fairly standard, usually sporting a look very similar to their present day schemes, the guides pretty much tell you that there isn't really a uniform for any of them, so how you choose to arrange the colours on the warriors of any given craft world is completely up to you. Have fun with it. And yes, while it is technically true that you've always been able to paint your models whatever colour you wanted, the modern game is a little bit more regimented in its colour schemes, so it's nice to have something that's a little bit more based on vibes. And as a side note, given that some of the pages have green paint splashes on them, there's a good chance that this book's previous owner, Stephen, played Bieltan.
There's also a couple of genuinely useful painting tips in here, like how to paint gems, legit, this is how both of us actually paint them today, and a comparison between what a fully painted Guardian looks like when primed in both white and black, which is certainly something that would have saved me a few botched paint jobs if I'd have seen this as a teenager. And that was the 3rd edition version of Codex Eldar, and whilst it is a little basic in some places, one cannot deny that it is certainly the 3rd edition Eldar Codex. And when you paint some of those lovely new Guardian models, just remember,
the only one stopping you from painting some sweet-ass flame designs on their helmets is you.
hello there. Thank you for watching all the way through to the end of this video. We hope you enjoyed it. Big thanks to our friend Tshaeness for helping out a bunch with this video, and to our patrons at patreon.com/snipeandwib who keep a roof over our heads. Also, if you missed it and you've ever wanted to send anything in to us, we now have a PO box. The address is on screen now, and all the stuff you need to know about it is in the announcement video that will be linked in the description. I think that's everything, so stay safe out there and take care of each other.
Okay, I created a note. Don't ever use the term juicy nuggets in a script again.